Absolutely can't wait for it. And in one half of your semifinals with Bellator 268 in the light heavyweight division, we have a couple of stud wrestlers going at it. And it's kind of crazy to think of it this way, but for Ryan Bader, he won the Ultimate Fighter way back when. And for Corey Anderson, he also won the Ultimate Fighter way back when. Both of them at 205 pounds. Both of them had ample opportunities in the UFC, but just never really developed to the full capacity that we thought they could. And for Corey Anderson, he was so green when he was on the Ultimate Fighter. He was one of those guys that a lot of people overlooked. He ended up using that grinding wrestling style that he has and was able to win out on the season. And he had big fights and he had, highs and lows. He had huge peaks and valleys really in that promotion. Ultimately culminated with a potential title eliminator against Jan Blachowicz that did not go his way whatsoever. And it was a small show. It was UFC Rio Rancho, John Jones in attendance. You had Michel Pereira losing to Diego Sanchez. And ultimately in that main event, Corey Anderson sees himself out of the promotion. He was on a heater at the time. So he comes over to Bellator. And they give him a layup of a 40-plus-year-old Melvin Manhoff who was blown up to 205 pounds. And Beeston's going to Beeston. And he ultimately mopped the floor with him. Then in his, quarterfinal and his first fight in this Grand Prix, he takes on Dovletsan Yagshimuradov, a guy that was a huge dark horse in the division. And I thought, and I predicted that Dovletsan was going to get the win. You had Corey Anderson. And when I watched that fight play out, it was just like watching a train wreck. I was so disappointed.
I gotta be honest, Craig. I felt great after that fight because it went exactly how it probably should have. Let's be honest. If Corey Anderson was gonna win that fight, what was he gonna do? Go for takedowns, implement ground and pound, and maybe get a finish. Now, the interesting thing about Corey Anderson in Bellator, I'll even say Corey Anderson for the last 4 fights, is he's developed a much more aggressive style because that was the narrative about Corey Anderson. It's not only that, yes, he's a little bit chinny, it's that he's just not that fun to watch at the end of the day. And in the UFC, they put a lot of value into your marketability and your watchability as an MMA fighter. And up until that Johnny Walker fight, the story about Corey Anderson was that he's just kind of a lay and pray guy. He's more of a point fighter. He's not really going in there to finish fights. And he was sick and tired of that narrative going into the Johnny Walker fight. And ever since then, we have seen a more aggressive version. Against Walker, he darted across the cage, threw one combination that hit Johnny Walker, and just went after him after he hurt him. And it was a great performance by Corey Anderson, and it kind of proved that, hey, Corey Anderson is not just that wrestler that he was back in the Ultimate Fighter. He has progressed his striking. He does have decent jiu-jitsu now. He's built up more than just his wrestling to the point where I don't immediately think of Corey Anderson and then just think of a 30-26 and that being his only method of victory. The thing about Corey Anderson, though, is that with that added aggression that he has brought to his game, his durability is in question.
He lost one fight.
I know, but still, all throughout his career, he is somebody who hasn't been the most durable fighter. Jean Vellante knocked him out. I never think of Corey Anderson and think, wow, this guy has a stone chin. So I do worry about Corey Anderson with his style of, hey, I'm going to go in there, I might eat a few more shots. I don't think he's going to go down after one punch from Ryan Bader. I'm not saying anything ridiculous like that. I just do worry that with Corey Anderson's more willingness to exchange a few punches to go get that takedown, when he does end up fighting a guy like Vadim Nemkov, or let's say he does fight, I don't know, Phil Davis down the road. Just guys who have decent power.
Again.
I do worry about him and his durability against some of those matchups in this division.
Yeah, and I say, again, Phil Davis, it seems like he's fought everybody at 205 pounds. He has 2 fights against Ryan Bader. Bader won both of those. He has 2 fights against Vadim Nemkov. Vadim's won both of those. Phil doesn't lose very often, but usually it's to the same fighters. But for Ryan Bader, the craziest thing is, in the graphic that I have up in front of you, he has a belt because he still is the Bellator heavyweight champ. His last win at heavyweight was over Fedor Emelianenko back in 2019 at the start of the year. Then he went to defend his belt against Czech Congo, more than deservedly so. There was an eye poke, the fight ends, and that was his last fight at 265 pounds. That was back in August of 2019, or rather September 2019. Since then, he lost to Vadim Nemkov, where he ate the head kick almost behind his ear. He goes down. He gets back up because the referee was Kerry Hatley, and he thought that, listen, a champ's got to get a champ's, opportunity to defend himself.
To quote Mario Yamasaki, I gave him the opportunity to be a warrior.
Kerry Hatley gave him the opportunity. So then he goes out there, and his next fight is against Lyoto Machida. And there was about almost a year, 8 months or so between that loss and the Machida fight. Now you have to think of it. Ryan Bader's first fight against Lyoto Machida, these guys are prime fighters. Machida a little bit further away than Bader, but both guys still prime fighters. Machida finished him in the second round easy. So then in the second fight, Ryan's like, I didn't forget about that loss all those years ago. And that was a classic Ryan Bader performance, and that was back early on this year.
He did look really good. It's just my issue with Ryan Bader as of late is that I don't really know where to gauge his talent against top-level light heavyweights. Because Lyoto Machida, I know he was the light heavyweight champion in the UFC, but physically his frame belongs a lot better in 185 pounds than in middleweight. So to say, to say Ryan Bader, he kind of absolved his sins with the win against Lyoto Machida, it's just hard to say because we don't really know what version of Machida he fought. Machida looked good against Gegard Mousasi, I'd say, not that long ago, but he still is pretty old in his career, and if you're going to beat Machida, you're probably going to go out there and out-grapple him, and that's exactly what Ryan Bader was able to do. This will be really interesting. I don't know who has the better wrestling in this matchup, and I really do think that's what it's going to come down to.
If you look at absolute specifics of the way these guys went through their college careers, for Corey Anderson, and I want to make sure I get it right, he went to Lincoln College, JUCO. He went from there to Division II. That one was, and again, I want to get it right, it was at Newbury College, and he was an All-American in D3. That one was at the University of Wisconsin, Whitewater, not West Point, Whitewater. If you look at it for Ryan Bader, Division I All-American, this guy has the pinnacle of wrestling. It's weird to see how these guys get into MMA because for Ryan Bader, he went and parlayed wrestling into MMA. He won the Ultimate Fighter Season 8 at light heavyweight. Pretty cool stuff. For Beastin 25-8, the voice in the back of his head was former Bellator champion Ben Askren that kind of got him involved with Roufusport. He gets into MMA. Again, he only had, I think it was 3 pro fights before he went on to the Ultimate Fighter. He wins it, and then he has tons of fights, and you know the story from then on out. But it's just crazy to me to see where Corey Anderson's career went, and then for Ryan Bader, too. I always thought him as, he didn't get it done against John Jones, and they were both early on. Every time Ryan Bader got close to the Sun Devils, he got burned. So it really is tricky. The narrative going into this one on the Bellator Countdown, as narrated the entire thing by Big John McCarthy, is Corey Anderson says he got the best of Ryan Bader, who was training for a 5-round main event or a 5-round fight, and he finished him in the 4th round. And Ryan Bader says, training doesn't really matter. And I agree to that extent. I mean, there's a lot of great hockey players that look good in junior, like Nail Yakupov, but then when it comes to the NHL, they just can't get it done. There's always these stories about guys sinking and swimming, like in Face Value by Phil Collins, where was in the air tonight about a guy that drowned? No, but both of these guys, when it came to their big opportunities in the UFC, they kind of drowned. But when it came to Bellator, they flip it on their head, and it's like the back of Phil Collins' head when we're just drum soloing in the air tonight. So, Matt, I ask you this. We know how good of wrestlers these guys are. We know how close they are to their primes. Ryan Bader's kind of sneaky because he's 38, but I would say he's still relatively close. He has A, a puncher's chance if he doesn't get hit, and B, he always has his wrestling to fall back on. We saw that in the Machida fight. Corey Anderson, though, still a lot closer to that prime age. I mean, he just turned 33 a couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago. Let's make sure. Let's be 100% clear. Corey Anderson is 32 years and 3 weeks old. So, yeah, he just turned 32. The odds for this one, Ryan Bader, plus 135 underdog, is your heavyweight champion with the organization. For Beastin 25-8, minus 165. Matt, we haven't looked at the Tapology picks or votes yet. We're going over under 70% Anderson. Where do you see that one?
I think they're 60-40 Anderson.
62% going with Beastin 25-8. 58% have him to win by knockout. For the 38% that have Ryan Bader, 52% by decision, 40% by knockout. Again, I doubt somebody's going to get a submission win in this fight. How do you see this?
No one's going to like what I'm about to say. I think this fight's going to look a lot like Ryan Bader's 2 fights with Phil Davis. I don't think this fight's going to be overly entertaining. And I hate saying that, and don't worry, for our next preview, I think that fight's going to be very entertaining. But you have to understand, Ryan Bader and Corey Anderson's wrestling pretty much cancel each other out. Although Ryan Bader might have slightly better credentials with him being a Division I wrestler, Corey Anderson still uses his wrestling a lot more in MMA, I would say. He is slightly more of a wrestler when it comes to actual MMA wrestling, so I would say they sort of cancel each other out. Let's say one guy does get the takedown on the other. I doubt they really have the ability to hold them down for all that long of time, and it's going to just take so much energy to get the other guy down that I doubt other guy has that in their game plan. Even if Ryan Bader can take Corey Anderson down, it's going to take him like 40 seconds of hard wrestling and then hopefully try to trip him to get it to the ground, or vice versa. Neither guy's going to get a takedown easy in this fight, and that's why I think they're just going to cancel each other out a lot. The one thing I will say, though, is that Corey Anderson, I think, has slightly better volume on the feet. This is weird because Ryan Bader, I think, is the more powerful guy on the feet. He's shown that he does have decent power on the feet, even though I don't think his striking defense is all that great, and I do worry about him against other top-level strikers. I just look at these guys as being very similar in a lot of areas throughout their MMA careers, but I do think Corey Anderson's the slightly more active guy, and I think that's why I have to pick him in this fight.
I'm going with the younger guy in this fight, in Corey Anderson, because as weird as it might seem, you talked about it in terms of volume, but in terms of length, in terms of how they utilize their length on the feet, Corey Anderson has not just the physical attributes, but he utilizes those things quite well when he is in the cage. Now, against big-time power punchers, against great boxers, against Jan Blachowicz, did that work out? No. Against Jean Vellante, did that work out? No. But I think in a fight like this with Corey Anderson, we've seen it from him so far. From the UFC in that run that he went on before he fought Blachowicz, and then in the last two fights that he's had, he's kind of been able to capture that magic. So for me, I think that Corey Anderson's going to go on from this fight, going to go into the finals, and going to book his spot against either your champion currently, Vadim Nemkov, or the dark horse out of Lithuania, Julius Anglickas. I absolutely love that fight and this fight. In this one, both of us going with Illinois' own Overtime Anderson to get the win. We got boots on the ground and John Franklin. He's going to be providing coverage live from the arena for Bellator 268, so stick around for that. Find us on FightNightPicks.com for more of that, as well as at FightNightPicks on Instagram, Twitter, and the various socials that are out there. Really looking forward to this one. We also have our main event that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.